Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and I'm here to bring you my little birthday book haul. For those of you who've been around my channel for a little longer, you might be wondering why I'm hauling books if I'm technically supposed to be in a book buying ban. And to you, I have to say, you're right, but I didn't buy these. Other people got them for me. Or they were purchased by me, but before the book buying ban was put into place. In some cases, a very, very long time before the book buying ban was put into place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I have a lot of books to show you guys today and a couple that I can actually talk to you guys about at length, which I normally don't do in book hauls because I tend to like to go into books without knowing too much about them. But for some of them, well, you'll see why they're an exception. Let's get started. The first section of books that I'm going to show you are ones that I've purchased myself, with these first couple being ones that I've purchased more recently. And starting off with a book that I've actually already read, it's All the Names They Used for God by Anjali Sachdeva. All the Names They Used for God is a short story collection, and it is actually Sachdeva's debut. And it is, in my opinion, a very, very strong debut. Each story is super thought-provoking and genre-bending. There's stuff in here for fans of horror, there's stuff in here for fans of fantasy, for fans of contemporary, for fans of women's fiction. I finished this a little bit earlier in the month, and it's still thought-provoking. Like, there's a couple stories in here that truly gave me chills and made me like deeply, deeply uncomfortable existing in the world just from the what ifs that the stories brought up. I struggle sometimes with short stories in that I don't feel that they give you like the entirety of a story as it ought to be. By which I mean that in short stories, because there's a more limited page count than there is in a full-length novel, I don't always feel as satisfied with the conclusions. I don't feel that they tie up the loose ends as effectively as they could, or they don't leave the right sort of things open to interpretation later on if that was the author's intent. And I'm very picky with the short stories and the short story collections that I do like. And Sachdeva killed it. I think she knocked it out of the park. She's up there with Kelly Link for me. Following that, we have The Waking Land by Callie Bates. And as I have not read this one yet, I can't speak on it nearly as intelligently. But what I can do is tell you the little that I do know about the book and explain to you why it enticed me to pick it up. The story follows a young woman named Alana who has been made a lady in a king's court. This king adopted her out of her magical homeland after her father was branded a traitor and raised her as though she were his own daughter. However, when that king winds up dead under mysterious circumstances, Alana is blamed for his murder and she has to flee for her life, going back to the homeland from whence she came and discovering a sort of nature magic within her. And from there, I was sold. I love nature magic. I know that it's done a lot in fantasy, but it's never something I get tired of. And while I am always looking for a sort of new twist on old tropes, after the year that we've all had, I have really been trying to dive into some more comforting media. So falling back on old favorites but spun in new story ways is definitely something that I'm looking for, and I am very excited to tell you more about this once I've actually read it. Following that, we have Mistress of Rome by Kate Quinn. For this, I know even less than I do for The Waking Lands. All I know is historical romance, political intrigue, gladiators? Question mark? But even the potential promise of gladiators and historical romance is enough to sway me, so this is on my list. Following that, I purchased Patsy by Nicole Dennis-Benn. And I know marginally more about this because I actually bought this book after hearing it hyped on my friend Jessie from the channel Bowties and Books' channel. I'll have them linked in the description box below as per usual. This book follows the eponymous Patsy, a young woman from Jamaica who, upon having a child, decides to leave Jamaica and immigrate to New York, chasing that great American dream that we all know and love, while her daughter back home struggles with the question of why she was left behind and why she couldn't be a part of her mother's American dream. I love stories that center family dynamics. I think they're some of the most fascinating ones out there to read, particularly the dynamics between mother and child. And I also find myself more and more frequently drawn to heroines who are unlikable, not in the 2012 YA way of being an unlikable heroine, which is, you know, like, I'm sassy, but I fit so hard into the not like other girls mold that all of the other girls who secretly think they're not like other girls do project on me and adore me. No shade if you're one of those. I definitely was in like 2011, 2012 when I was in middle school. You'll grow out of it, I promise. But I digress. What I'm talking about here is a protagonist who makes some potentially like very ugly decisions that I don't necessarily agree with. Someone who, under normal circumstances, I might have a more difficult time empathizing with, simply because our moral centers perhaps do not align in the same ways. So I'm excited not only to read a story that I'm sure will promise a lot of a lot of very interesting and thought-provoking ideas about certain family dynamics, but also will sort of help me engage with why or why not I like Patsy and whether or not me liking her matters. I think at the best of times, the media you consume should teach you something about yourself, and I am excited to learn a little bit more about myself via Patsy. Following that, and it just arrived, and I'm really glad it did because I didn't want to film this video before it had come out, I got Mr. Impossible, book 2 of the Call Down the Hawk / Dreamer trilogy. The standard not pre-order cover looks like this. As I said, this book is a sequel to Maggie Stiefvater's Call Down the Hawk, the first of a new trilogy following the character Ronan from her very famous Raven Cycle series. As we learn in the Raven Cycle and go further into depth with in Call Down the Hawk, Ronan is a dreamer, or a Grey Warren, meaning he is a person who can imagine something in his mind as he sleeps and dreams and take it back with him into the waking world. This is a gift that Ronan inherited from his father, who died under oh my god. Apologies if I'm sitting in a slightly different position. There was just a car crash right outside my house. Everyone's fine, everyone's super responsive. Emergency response vehicles may be coming. I'll try to avoid the sirens for the duration of this video. Feels pretty apt that there was a car crash while I was talking about the Ronan book. I'm not quite sure where I stopped talking about this, but the point is Ronan's power, the more he plays with it and expands his ability to use it and learns about it, the further he is drawn into the world that his dad so desperately tried to leave, full of art forgery and running away from certain hidden government agencies, etc. All the while he's trying to keep his gift from accidentally killing him. It's one hell of a ride, and I cannot wait to continue Ronan's story with Mr. Impossible. Continuing with books I bought before my buying ban came in, but ones that I may be allowed to talk about just a little bit more than I was able to talk about those above. If you recall, in my previous book haul, I hauled Winter Keep, book 4 of the Graceling saga by Kristen Kishore. And in this haul of sorts, in that I'm hauling these books to my present location from my parents' house, I'm bringing in Graceling, Fire, and Bitter Blue, books 1 through 3 of the Graceling Realm saga. Giving a full synopsis of all of these books will be really difficult because, one, they are not direct sequels toward one another, they're more companion novels, so it would take one heck of a long time. That is, it would if I could accurately recall everything that's happening in these books. The reason I'm bringing them back is that I want to reread Graceling, etc. before I pick up Winter Keep. I want to really re-immerse myself in this world. A thing I definitely recall about Graceling is the concept of graces. So certain people are born with heterochromia, and that's a sign that they have a grace, which is basically an ability that they have that's better than standard, far better than anyone could get with, even with years upon years of training. A grace could be as commonplace as you make perfect chocolate pudding every single time you try, or it could be as broad as, for example, killing, which is the grace that our protagonist Katsa is graced with in the first book, Graceling.
Say grace one more time, Betty.
But in addition to gracelings, there are creatures called monsters, which we discover in Fire, a prequel of sorts to Gracelings following the eponymous Fire, who is half monster. And monsters are creatures that have like a sort of vampiric-like allure to people. People are drawn in by what monsters do and say, and a monster could, if it could speak, basically get a human to do whatever it wants. But outnumbering both, we have humans like Queen Bitterblue. And in this sequel to the events of Graceling, one such human, as you could probably guess, Bitterblue, the queen, has to deal with a tremendous amount of political intrigue because, well, it's a bunch of spoilery reasons that I will not get into. Partly because spoilers, and partly because, like I said, don't remember them all. But either way, I'm very excited to get to these 3 books again and fall in love with the world so that I can dive back into it with Winter Keep. And in a basically identical vein, I also previously hauled Samantha Shannon's The Mask Falling, the 4th book in the Bone season septology. I believe it's planned to be 7 books. And because the gaps between the publishing of these books happened to be a little bit longer at the best of times, but were twice as long because of the publishing of Priory of the Orange Tree, I wanted to pick up the previous books as a sort of refresher before diving in. These include The Bone Season, The Mime Order, and The Song Rising. Unlike the Graceling series, the Bone Season is definitely direct sequels of one another. They take place in a sort of dystopian alternate reality where clairvoyance is possible and people have these gifts. However, in the Republic of Scion, which is it's England, clairvoyance, or voyants as they're called, are basically outlawed. Though people cannot control whether or not they have clairvoyance, if they do and if they use it, it is punishable by law. This story follows Paige Mahoney, a voyant, of course, who is part of a crime syndicate because her clairvoyance is a super rare one. She is a dream walker, meaning that when people are dreaming, she can basically enter into their consciousnesses and pull some truly Inception level shit, with their brains. She can gather information, she can implant thoughts. It's crazy stuff and super useful for crime syndicate behaviors. But of course, having a super rare and super strong voyancy means that Paige is a little bit easier than average to catch. And when she is caught, rather than being sent to the Tower of London where she thinks she's going to be put to death, she is instead sent to, for what all intents and purposes looks like a labor camp, run by these alien beings called Rephites, who are using the voyants that have been shipped to them for their own nefarious purposes. And what those purposes are and how to get out of this camp is what Paige finds herself having to do in the Bone season, and the story goes from there. And I love this series. I think it's fantastic. The fourth book is the exact midpoint of the series, so I am super excited to see what Samantha Shannon is doing with it. But before I read it, I need to read the first 3 books because there is, oh my gosh, so much that I'm certain that she's been peppering through the story literally from book 1 that I don't want to miss in book 4. And with that, we move on to books that were sent or given to me. Starting with a book I don't even know if I should bring up on this channel. It's called Winners First by Priscilla B. Dewey. It is theoretically a little book in verse. However, from what I've seen of it, none of it's in meter, which for a story about a horse and a rhythmic running style, you think that meter would fit in naturally. The back cover copy goes as follows. A young racehorse is so polite, he doesn't want to beat the other horses. He finds a way to win a race by being courageous and learns it's good to lead the way. A whole stack of these books were donated to the library where one of my very close friends works. And as it is published by a vanity press, they can't in good conscience sell these at a library sale, which is what they normally do with donations. So rather than letting this masterpiece get recycled, I jokingly asked my friend for a copy, and for my birthday, they gave me one. And my God, am I excited. Like, this is the sort of illustration that this book is peppered with. And I may have to do a live reading of this on this channel, just so that I know that reading it isn't a fever dream. In a far more serious sense, I was sent Tokyo Ever After by Emiko Jean after winning it in a Goodreads ARC giveaway. In addition to having just a beautiful, beautiful cover, what really intrigued me about this book is the premise. The long and short of it appears to be the Princess Diaries, but make her Japanese. So Izumi Tanaka is a kind of misfit in her California school, but a clue comes to light that reveals the identity of her heretofore unknown father, and he ends up being the Crown Prince of Japan, which makes Izumi a literal princess. And in an absolute whirlwind, she is whisked to Japan to meet a father she's never met in a country she's never known anything about. However, it's not all tiaras and rainbows and fancy balls. There are conniving cousins, paparazzos who cannot wait to see Izumi fail, and a scowly but very sexy bodyguard. Not to mention literally thousands of years of customs and traditions that Izumi has to learn overnight if she wants to basically survive and thrive in this new role. I mean, like I said, it's literally The Princess Diaries, but make it Japanese, and I am so excited to pick up this book. The Princess Diaries is one of my favorite comfort movies. That should probably be like the word that encompasses the entire vibe of this video is comfort. I'm all about the comfort media. This is, again, a piece of comfort media, but with a new spin on it. And I'll be reading this very, very soon and probably posting a review because this is an ARC and we review ARCs on this channel. We don't sell them. Following that, we have The Turning by Emily Whitman. This is the first of 3, yes, 3, I'm still shook, books that were sent to me by my dear friend Katie from the channel A Sea of Tomes. At this point, I should probably just have Katie linked in every video that I make, but her channel is definitely in the description box below of this one. I don't know much about the story besides it's recommended by Katie, and if Katie recommends something, I'm basically instantly going to read it. But what I do know about this is that it follows the Selkie mythos. And y'all, let me tell you, I cannot find a good Selkie story to save my life, particularly one that focuses on male Selkies, because the difference between the way that male Selkies and female Selkies are talked about is insane. One day I will go on my full unhinged rant about what stories humans tell about other sentient beings or new sentient beings says about the cultures that those humans come from, but that is a story for a different time. The sea fascinates me, Selkies fascinate me, and male Selkies in particular are rather slept on by the writers of the world at large. So I am very, very, very excited to pick this one up. Katie also got me a copy of Midsummers Mayhem by Rajni LaRocca. In general Wendy tradition, there's not much I know about this book except for that it is highly recommended by both Katie and my friend Cara from the channel Wilde Book Garden, again linked in the description box below. This story follows a young Indian American girl named Mimi who feels really invisible in her family. In order to sort of try to prove herself and make a place for herself in her family and the gastronomic world at large, Mimi wants to cook something that her father, who is a renowned food writer, will find delicious and more than palatable. However, this dream seems to be derailed when her father mysteriously loses all sense of taste, and Mimi doesn't know what she can make that will sort of reawaken this ability in him. As she struggles with what she's going to cook, Mimi finds herself drawn into the woods behind her home where she meets a young man named Vic, and the two of them enter these woods and find them to be a little bit more magical and full of more enchanting ingredients than either of them ever expected, and the story goes from there. And y'all, it's full of baking magic. I have literally a whole series on my channel where I cook food from books and talk about the books in them. And this book, I did a little flip through. It has literal recipes right in the back of it. I don't have to search for anything. I can just cook stuff directly from this and talk to you about it. And y'all, I'm so excited. Baking magic, I cannot stress enough how excited I am for baking magic. Cooking and commensality are as close as many people in the real world get to magic, I think. There's something very special about the breaking of bread with those closest to you and the bonds that that act seems to form. And I think that in creating the bread that is broken, you entangle yourself even further in the creation and the solidifying of these relationships. And I think that that's a sort of magic in and of itself. I'm rambling, I'm gonna stop. Baking magic. And rounding out that list and proving that Katie knows me better than basically anyone in the entire world, she also got me a fantasy book that I think is going to stop my heart, and that is The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. Do I know much about this book? No. Do I know that it's supposed to be about the blending of Inuit and Norse mythology wrapped into one fantastic stories of gods and humans and their interactions? Yes. Is that enough to get me to read literally anything? Absolutely it is. Chunky, standalone, polar fantasy, blending two mythologies that seem disparate, but I think will work tremendously well together. I'm sold. Katie knows me. And closing things off with an anonymous package. I don't know who sent these last two books to me. There wasn't a note involved. I do have my guesses, but if it was you, please let me know so that I can thank you properly. But this person also knows me tremendously well because the first book that they sent me was Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a book that I've wanted to read ever since I heard it mentioned on Ashley from Don't Have a Degree in Readings channel. Again, linked in the description box below. This story follows a young Mexican woman named Cassiopeia whose life is like act one of a fairy tale level full of drudgery. She does a lot of cooking, she does a lot of cleaning, up until one day she accidentally frees a Mayan death god from captivity, and the two of them go on a whirlwind of an adventure from Mexico City to the literal Mayan underworld, all during the Jazz Age. This sounds like perfection. I cannot wait to pick this up. And the final book I have to show you for this haul is The Lovely War by Julie Berry. This has been making the rounds around BookTube for quite a while at this point, and it's one I was this close to buying right before my buying ban clicked into place because Greek mythology, like the Greek gods, the pantheon, and all of their messiness and screwing with the human world in their own ways during the time of World Wars I and II. To the best of my knowledge, it's told from the point of view of Aphrodite, who is sort of recounting this tale as it happens. And because it's being told by Aphrodite, I imagine that love and like a sort of romance, or perhaps a different sort of love, maybe it's a familial love, maybe it's a platonic one. Regardless, I think love is going to be a very cornerstone-y emotion in this book. And of course, wartime, the stakes of it are going to be through the roof. I'm very excited how those two elements are going to interplay. My favorite part of old Greek literature is actually watching the way that people assumed that the gods interfered in their heroes' lives. A sort of ever-present and invisible force that was actually the root of everything and behind every conflict and victory. And I'm really excited how that is going to be brought forth into a not necessarily modern, but a more modern setting. And this is 100% me buying into BookTube hype, you know? I hope that I can trust y'all on this, and that it's going to be a story that is worth the, I'm sure, heartache that I will endure while reading it. And there you have it, folks. This is my little birthday book haul. All well and good and correct within the parameters of my buying ban. Thank you so much to those of you who sent me books, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave it a thumbs up, and if you liked me, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. I post new videos every weekend, and I would love to have you join my little booktube family. Comment down below if you have any opinions as to which of these books I should pick up first, or if you don't have the spoons to write out a whole comment, just leave me a little emoji and let me know you were there. I think a book stack will do for this one, just on account of duh, it's a book haul. And if you'd like to see a little bit more bookish content from me, all of my socials are in the description box below. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads. Thank you again so much for watching this video, and I will see you with the next one very, very soon. Goodbye.